Sure. So this is the studio of Red Bucket Films. Uh, and this is where we spend all day, every day, trying to come up with new crazy ideas and fighting with each other and sometimes coming up with solutions. This is kind of a classic New York um, where we can come to have little pieces of fresh air. They're always shooting movies in this alley. They film all Law and Orders and Men in Black. And anytime you see a kind of a police chase in New York, they're often in this alley. Um, and then this is my desk. And this is me. Okay, so the first question is, how did you get into the practice of mapping, and what led you to the practice of mapping? So for me, very personally, I was lucky enough to grow up in New York City, where there's always so much happening on the streets of New York. And I was raised in a way to always be finding the beauty and the interest in everyday stories and everyday places and everyday people, and that we could really find a lot of inspiration and entertainment and information in the everyday. And to be able to extract the narratives and the stories from the everyday to be able to kind of remind people of the kind of the magic and the spontaneity and the beauty and the ugliness and the insanity of just who we are as we are. So for me, a map is essentially a framework for a narrative of a place. But it's really just the framework, the architecture. And what I became very interested in are the stories that take place within this framework. And I felt that there was a layer to mapping that was a very important layer that was completely missing somehow. Obviously the technology of maps are increasing more and more so, and now we can travel anywhere around the world that we care to and kind of have this bird's eye view from platforms such as Google and Bing and other mapping platforms. But it was always coming from this kind of mechanical perspective, or even street view, which is incredibly impressive, but at the same time represents kind of a dead city, and doesn't allow the cultures and the stories that exist within these lines, within these streets, within these buildings, to really come to life for their audience. I wanted to create a map that allowed people to explore a city really from the human perspective, rather than from just a kind of data perspective or a mechanical perspective. I wanted the audience to be able to say, wow, this is what it feels like to actually be there and to see for myself and to walk down the streets. So that's what MyBlock is trying to achieve, is this feeling of intimacy with the location, and not just a representation of it, but the most kind of intimate and living representation possible of what does a street actually mean, and what are the stories that exist within it. And when I was growing up, I became very interested in filmmaking and the power of the medium of moving image. With the kind of emergence of user-generated video, which is this idea that we now all have video cameras in our pockets, we've become a kind of very prolific generation where we're creating so much content, and it's getting dumped onto various websites, but the video content isn't connecting with itself to add up to a larger story. And we felt that there was this very kind of natural connection between locations and user-generated video, and a way to connect these individual videos to tell a bigger story by using the framework of a map. So question 2 is, how is the user's contribution managed? What we felt is critical to the kind of identity and the experience of MyBlock is that it's not coming from a single perspective, that there is no one journalist or there is no one film that can completely capture the energy and the diversity of a city. It's just impossible. There's no single author who has the authority to represent the entirety of a culture. And so for us, it's the idea that everybody has a role in defining their own element of a city. The contribution process is really, in some ways, not managed. What we're trying to achieve is a system in which everything can find its place. Everything has a place. Everything has a right place. It just needs to be put in its place rather than being floating around with no context. And we allow the users to do this, the MyBlock community to do this. Of course, we monitor the content that's coming in, but we really try not to have a feeling where there's some sort of regulatory body that is having editorial or curatorial control, that this is really, our curatorial process comes in the design of the platform, and then it's up to the people to choose how they wish to use it and how they wish to represent themselves. And it's not about our perspective, it's about their perspective, and we really want to respect and honor that. There's a system in which users can vote on the quality of videos or flag videos because perhaps they are inappropriate or offensive, or maybe they're misplaced, or maybe they're mislabeled, and encourage a kind of community to self-police and self-kind of dictate. So we don't sit there and say, hey, we like this video, so we'll put it up, and we don't like this video, so we won't put it up. We hope that the people and the community of MyBlock are doing that instead. In terms of contributing video content and sharing your videos on MyBlock, it's also a very simple process by which you create a user profile, and got the movie that you wish to upload, and through a very simple upload process in which you tag it to a specific location, give it a description, which is the process you want to start with your work, which is the social common aim you wanted to reach with your work. We believe that the more that people get to actually see and experience, the more human the world becomes. And to humanize things is to create understanding, is to create communications, is to create a stronger connection between things that might not necessarily be connected before. So for instance, in New York City, Harlem, which is in northern Manhattan, and a neighborhood out in East New York in the Bronx are very separate locations and very isolated and don't interact. But if we can create a platform that allows people to connect Harlem to the Bronx and take a walk between these two places and understand more intuitively the connections, the differences, the similarities between these two cultures, the more that people can actually begin to become less isolated and less kind of self-centered and more open to what else is going on in the world. And not in a very intellectual way, not in a way that takes great brain power, but in a fun and entertaining way through street video. That's why we love user-generated video, is because it at the same time is fun and easy and exciting to watch because it's real and it's spontaneous, and at the same time very telling, very informative of the most intimate elements of a culture. So it's really the perfect medium to allow people to see and understand and experience culture. And it exists 24 hours a day on the internet in any language. It's a universal language video. So if I were to read about, Madrid in Spanish, A, it would come from one author, and B, I wouldn't understand even when I was reading because I don't speak Spanish. But if I were to explore a series of videos I would really have just a kind of an understanding of the feelings of elements of the city of Madrid. I've learned as much about my city as I have since working on this project, and seeing little pieces of culture from around the city emerge um, gives me a much larger sense of my city, which is a wonderful feeling. I hope others can also experience. In New York, we say you can get anything you want anytime you want. You can find anybody you want, because there's some representation of everybody here. So it's a wonderful place to start a project like this, where there really is, really an entire world on every single block. There's going to be, you stand on the corner for half an hour and you will see one of the richest people in America and the poorest people in America walk by you, and that makes it so exciting all the time. Um, so, what is the next phase of growth development that our research is undergoing? Um, so, right now is a very exciting and challenging time for MyBlock because we're working on the new version of it. When we launched MyBlock, we had this really kind of just crazy idea, and there were a few of us that believed in it and wanted to see it through. So, with very little resources and a lot of kind of delusional optimism, we came together to embark on the process of creating MyBlock. And we've put the first version out, which is currently on the internet as you see it now. Um, Over the past year since it's been out, we've really had the opportunity to think about how to make an even more fluid and natural experience for the community. We believe that the more people that participate with MyBlock, the more interesting it becomes ultimately, because the more perspectives are represented. There are challenges within that because, of course, the more people and the more video content, the harder it is to kind of make sure that it's all kind of keeping shape. But that's also one of the exciting challenges. But so we've really been able to kind of look at our platform and understand the way that people interact with it, and then start to plan the next version. And one thing that's always been missing in my mind, that I've been learning from this process, is that you have to make things really easy for people if you want them to engage with it. Once they begin engaging with it, you can start to try to give them more information, but that you really have to make the process very fun and easy. What we're working on right now is the new platform, which will be coming out in the springtime. And we're very excited to kind of share it with people. There's new functionalities and new ways to explore the city. But we're also coming out with our first mobile application. And that becomes, I think, very exciting for me, because within this application, we have this really wonderful video making technology, which I won't talk too much about because we haven't come out yet, but hopefully you guys will all get to play with it when we do come out with it. And the mobile application allows people to very instantly and easily be able to capture their experiences on their mobile phone and here on the map immediately. So, come spring, we're going to be releasing the new MyBlock website, as well as our first mobile app. And then, of course, or perhaps, of course, maybe it's not obvious, but to us it's obvious. Our hope is to be able to expand MyBlock outward to other cities. That's when we think it becomes even more interesting. It's not meant to just say, here's New York. New York is just the start of it. It's meant to enable people to explore the world and discover stories in this way from around the world. And we're very excited in your future to start allowing this technology to be used in other locations. But first, we have to get it just right in New York. And the last question is, what are your personal references about the theme of mapping, from ancient to contemporary ones? My personal references aren't even so much about mapping, but are more about stories and filmmaking. And I love documentary film, and I love watching user-generated videos on the internet. Um, it was from there that there was a realization of the type of map that was possible, and not so much in a kind of historical understanding of map. It became a lot of fun to play with new mapping technologies like Google Maps, and Bing, for kind of being able to discover almost any street that there is in the world. And I remember when, Google Earth first came out, and kind of like the pyramids, and then suddenly being at the pyramids, and how surreal that was. But yet that there was something that felt fake about it. There was something that felt like this is all just kind of a fabrication of reality. This isn't actually reality. This is a kind of a smoke and mirrors feeling, because sure, they're showing me the pyramids, but it feels very impersonal. And it feels like if there was a computer glitch in their servers, the pyramids would disappear. And so for us, it was about creating a much more literal and grounded and real representation of the pyramids. When I click on the pyramids, I want to be taken inside somebody's video camera where they're telling me stories, and it's dark, and that's really what it's like to be at the pyramids, and not kind of have this satellite perspectives. I want to encourage people that when they're in New York, to share their videos on MyBlock, because they can then become the representatives of locations for the rest of the world to understand, and it makes MyBlock more interesting for everybody else. And to stick around to see what's coming next, because hopefully this is just the beginning of what can become a more and more interesting project that's really meant for the people. So that's it.